Lightning strikes the cup. Plus, are there more Wild players maybe on the move? We'll talk about all that, and we'll preview the 2020 NHL Draft with our guest, Chris Peters. Episode 42 drops now.
Masks, hats, tees, and hoodies, SodaStick is constantly bringing you new and original swag. Whether you want to rep the Minnesota Vikings with the Bud Grant crew neck, or let folks know you're from the state of hockey with the McGolden Light Pond Hockey Club gear, SodaStick has you covered. Toss down that Bardown Beauties code at checkout for free shipping on all purchases at sodastick.com, official presenting sponsor of the Bardown Beauties podcast. Hello, everybody. We're back, episode 42, recording on a Friday, and naturally potential news might be breaking. We're not sure if there will be legs to this, but in case you guys hadn't seen, Michael Russo of The Athletic Minnesota reported that Devan Dubnyk very involved in the conversations of a trade to San Jose. We've heard things trickle in that seems like a very real possibility, which isn't all too shocking, right, Alexis? I mean, Bill Guerin was very vocal at the end of the Wild season that he was very unsatisfied with the goaltending. But it's another one of those staple pieces that could possibly be out, which to me means I have to make new friends in the locker room, and I hate that. But ultimately, I mean, what do you think? Is this going to be a real thing? And are we looking at new goaltenders next season for the Minnesota Wild?
Well, speaking of friends in the locker room, I don't know if I've ever told this story on the podcast, but I gotta tell this story now because this Wild season was my second season with the team. Jesse, you've been with them longer than I have. And so I'm still getting to know the guys, right? And kind of those little side conversations you have with each other in the locker room.
Which takes a while.
It does. It takes a long time. Now that we got the season postponed and possibly no locker rooms ever again, I don't know where this is going from here, but Devan Dubnyk was the very first Wild player to ever say something to me outside of the media scrum. And when he just asked me one time, hey, how are you doing? I was like, good. How are you? We were just waiting to interview him, and I was over there with a couple other reporters, and he was the first person to ever say anything to me outside of a media scrum. So that holds a special place in my heart, in my career. And so, yeah, but like you said, it's not surprising that Devan Dubnyk, rumor talk is happening.
Yes,
now.
Not confirmed yet. I mean, as we're recording this again, Friday morning, not confirmed. We're covering our bases in case something happens later this afternoon.
As it will. I guarantee you something. It's going to happen 10 minutes after we stop recording. Yeah. No, we got things to do this weekend. So yeah, it's not surprising at all. We knew that the goalie situation was something that Bill Guerin was adamant on changing. We didn't know what that change was going to be, but we knew that there was going to probably be a different look to the netminders for the Minnesota Wild, whether that was, they switch up who's the starter, or they bring in someone new, or they do a buyout or pull up a young guy. And so, yeah, we'll see, what that looks like if it does end up unfolding. But either way, even if this trade doesn't go through, I think it just says a lot that Bill Guerin is serious about this, that it's gotten to this point where there's at least a rumor that he might go somewhere. And if this isn't it might be something else at some point in the near future. So I think that's kind of what I take away from it at the minimum, because I think a lot of people were like, he's not going to do anything to the netminders. I feel like when I talk to people about this situation, so many people are like, I don't think he's going to make any changes. He's not going to do anything different. And so I think this just shows how serious he is, which I think is a good thing in the long run.
Well, and I think it also, again, shows they're putting maybe a little bit of stock in Capo. We've been wondering, what does that look like? I mean, the top goaltender in the AHL, are you thinking that he's the real deal? Does he step in? Does he get that backup play next season? And do we see more of him? I think that is very telling that, hey, we're going to get Devan out, which, at the end of the day, too, is beneficial for Devan. He has the opportunity. I think he still wants to be a starter. Nobody's happy being a backup, right? You want to be a starting goalie. You want to get back to your prime. I think for him, this could be an opportunity for him to be a starter. San Jose could use all the help that they could get. Certainly, they're not where they used to be in years past. I think it's ironic that we got Stalock by way of San Jose, and we love to trade with San Jose all the time.
Yeah.
The Wild have done this in
Burns,
the past. Burns, yeah. Say hi to Burns out there while you're there. And again, nothing's confirmed. This could all fall apart, but it's a very interesting thing. So kudos to Michael Russo for kind of sniffing that out. I don't know. I haven't heard much more about whether Donato is involved in that, Ryan Donato, whether he would be on the move as well, and what Minnesota would be getting in return too. So we'll find out maybe a little bit more about that. If the trade happens, when it happens, we will try to update you and give some live reacts. So be sure to stay tuned to our YouTube channel for that. In non-wild news, we have a cup winner, guys, or, we knew that was happening a little bit. I think we all predicted that Tampa was going to close it out over the weekend. We were right. Lightning strikes. They win their first cup since 2004. Steven Stamkos gets to lift the cup. Minnesota's own Ryan McDonough gets to have a taste. Todd Richards, who's also from Minnesota, he gets a bit of that. Your thoughts, Alexis, on how the series concluded? I mean, that game 5 or that last game wasn't game 6, was not Dallas's best performance of the playoffs.
It kind of unfolded exactly how I thought the end of the series was going to go. Just as far as I said this in the last podcast, I said, I think Dallas is going to give them a run for their money. They did that in game 5. They pushed the series out a little bit longer. And then Tampa just completely shuts them down in game 6, which is kind of what I expected. I expected Dallas to give them a taste of are we maybe going to do this? And then Tampa just saying, absolutely not. That's not going to happen. And then just shutting it down from there. So it's gotta be disappoint. I mean, I'm just thinking okay, if I'm a Stars fan, I'm looking at this and saying, you win in double OT to force a game 6, and then you get shut out in game 6. I don't know. So that is got to be a little bit disappointment. Yeah.
What's that all about? That's insane.
They had 7 shots for the first 2 periods. I mean, it was it was not good.
Yeah.
It was not good.
How you win a cup. I mean, right. I do. I mean, kudos to Tampa. They've been so close. I mean, last year, very, very disappointing early run. I know you weren't as disappointed in that, being a Torts fan and all, but
Torts lives rent free in everybody's head.
Exactly. So, I have to ask this, and this is what I've been curious about. So with COVID being so rampant, right, and whatever side of the fence you're on, it's something that clearly exists. As we saw the whole season shut down because of it. It's so exciting. The NHL made it through, right? They did it. No positive tests. Outstanding job by the NHL. I'll give them all that credit. And then Tampa gets the cup and they take it back to Florida, which has been a COVID crock pot, it seems, where they don't think that this exists. And they're passing it around. And into the COVID crock pot we go. And you jump in and it's they're sharing the cup with non-players and people that weren't in the bubble. And it just kind of seems a little bit reckless. It was also concerned because it's this is your one moment, right? And you think you dream of this, what am I going to do with my day with the cup? I mean, I don't even know if players are going to have the opportunity to take the cup with them for a day. Mm-hmm. What does that look like? I mean, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, again, for me, I was just ooh, don't do, there's still a pandemic going on from as far as I'm concerned. Don't put your lips on that together. That doesn't seem right.
I get the excitement, right? Like you said, obviously this is the moment that everyone waits for in their career, whether it happens to you once or 10 times, it's going to be exciting every time. You're going to want to celebrate. You're going to want to share that excitement with your fans and your friends and your family. But you guys did so well. You made it through the Stanley Cup playoffs. What was it, 40,000 tests, not a single positive test over the course of 2 months. You were doing amazing. And then you come home and you're swapping spit.
You crowned your champ. Yeah, you crowned your champ. You did it. I think you did it against all odds. And now you're literally swapping spit.
Florida is not the place to swap spit. If you're going to swap spit, do not do it in Florida. That is not the scene. Do not do it.
In any case, swapping spit in any case, whether it's
even
drinking
pre-pandemic.
It's I've been to Florida many a times. It's not I probably swapped some spit down there, but Panama City
was
Beach.
Pre-pandemic though.
Yeah, right.
I don't know how I feel about that. Probably not the best idea.
I don't. I cringe thinking about it. But I mean, again, and I feel bad because it's it's you. That's the one thing you want to share it with your town. You want to share it with your city. I love that they did a boat parade. I think that's a way to safely distance, because I was worried that they were going to go about with a regular parade, and it's ooh, no, don't do that.
My dad even said when they won, he was and they showed the Tampa Bay fans celebrating. He's they're not social distancing. He's oh wait, I forgot Florida doesn't listen to any of the rules. He's they do whatever they want down there.
Yeah, they just whatever, it's fine. But so I mean, it's tough, right? I mean, you don't want to hold the celebration because it's still exciting. You still brought it home. You still, I have to bring this into football a little bit too. I don't know if you saw Tom Brady had tweeted, he's way to bring it home. It's you've been in Tampa for 3 months. What are you talking about, Tom Brady?
Home. Okay, Tom.
On, man. Okay, Tom. Cool story, bro. What's the first thing that you would do with the cup if you were to win it? Where are you taking it?
Oh my gosh. I never thought I'd be asked this question. Well, I will say that my favorite day with the cup was definitely Phil Kessel, who ate hot dogs out of it. And I think mine would be something similar to that, probably. Like, I don't know. Maybe I would use it as like a cup for ranch, and then I would like eat pizza out of it because I like ranch with my pizza.
Ranch.
So much ranch. You'd be good to go though. I think that would maybe be what I would do. I don't know. Yeah, Phil Kessel eating hot dogs out of it is for sure my favorite.
Would you do it in the cities like Inver Grove? Would you go back home with mom and dad, or would you go to like St. Paul? Where would you go? Do anything cool with it here in Minnesota?
I feel like you got to take it to the Twin Cities, right? Like there's nothing cool happening back home where like my hometown is. Like I got to do something within the Twin Cities. Like maybe just stand out on my balcony with it. Sorry, I love you, Inver Grove.
Yeah. I think I'd go up to Rainy Lake International Falls, which is, I believe, probably seen the cup a few times because I know there's guys up Bob Mason, I think, when he was playing. I don't know, just something about being on the lake with the cup has always seemed really, really cool. Yeah. Like I love the cities and everything, but I would totally take it up there. My family lives on an island on Rainy Lake. And so we have a boathouse that like you could just go stand up on top of the boathouse and raise the cup. And I just think that would be really sweet.
Didn't Tyler Bozak do that last year when the Blues won it? Didn't he take it out on the boat for the day? I thought I remember pictures of like him and his wife and like, I think they have a daughter. And I thought I remember pictures from a boat when he did that.
I think Jamie Langenbrunner, when he won it with the Devils, went back to Cloquet. And I want to say he went inner tubing with it. Like they strapped it up and like, I'm pretty sure they put like a life jacket on it, right? Because I mean,
oh my God, cute.
It's down to the bottom of a pool, but the bottom of a lake's a little different. I have to imagine. Like you better make sure you don't
imagine losing the Stanley Cup in the bottom of a lake.
Like, oh my God, what a story!
Tragic.
Right? What a story. But yeah, so I think that I think he's done that. I want to say that was him. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, guys, let me know. Somebody did it. I'm pretty sure somebody in Minnesota tubed with it. I wouldn't tube with it.
Just making shit up.
Yeah, I wouldn't tube with it because I'm already concerned enough about my own life while I'm.
I was gonna say I can't even tube on my own. Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna be like, please don't lose this giant trophy either. But yeah, I'd go up to Rainy Lake. So if I ever have the opportunity, I don't know that I ever would, but
if I ever have the opportunity,
I don't know how that would be possible. My favorite time seen, I think Brett Hedkin brought it to North St. Paul in a parade, and I got to have I was like 18, and I snuck in and I took a little sip of beer because I was like in there with the cool kids. I was like, yes, this is great. Sorry, for legal purposes, it's a joke. It wasn't a joke.
For legal purposes. I feel like that's like our new catchphrase. We should put that on a t-shirt. For legal purposes.
I mean, we can. Why not? Let's do it. In other news too, obviously the draft coming up tomorrow and Wednesday. Chris Peters will join us as our guest in segment 2 to talk a little bit more about that. New York Rangers first overall pick. The Wild have currently just their number 9 in the first round. But you feeling good about a number 9 pick? Do you think they go? What do you think they're eyeing down? A center? We talked with Judd Brackett, and he said he thinks it's a very strong class. He likes where they're at with centers. Do you think they go center, Alexis, or what position do you think they're eyeing?
I don't know. I know there's some people who are saying like maybe they should draft a goalie, and I'm like, please, for the love of God, don't do that. Like if you're like whatever you do not draft a goalie.
Yeah.
I think
are so hard to like, especially in the first round. Like,
yes.
No, like
that's like drafting 4 quarterbacks in the first 4 rounds of fantasy football. Like, just don't go right for the goalie. I think you got to try to go center, right? I mean, I think that you've got a decent enough pick to get something good. You know, like you're not so far down the list where all the good things are going to be taken. I think you gotta shoot for something like that, because I think at least you can say you tried then, you know, like if you're like, hey, we picked a center, we gave it like our best shot. I think if you try to do something else with that pick, you're going to see an uproar from fans, except for the 7 who want them to draft a goalie in the first round. But like everyone else, I think would be pretty disappointed if they don't try to get a center. So yeah, we'll see. I think they've got, decent draft position. I think the highest the Wild have ever drafted was 7th. Is that
I want to say
Dumba was? I think Matt Dumba was 7th.
Yeah. What was Granlund? I know Granlund was high though too.
But they've only had like 2 or 3 like top 10 picks.
It's
all
the
time.
Chuck Fletcher era traded away so much. So yeah, it's exciting to be back in the first round and to actually pay attention to the first round again a little bit, right? I mean, I think the biggest thing, I think you're right. I think you got to go center. You got to at least try. I know when media had their availability with Judd Brackett, he had mentioned that it all depends though. They don't know how these guys are going to translate. These are kids, they're so young and they're playing in all these different leagues, and he feels like it's a very strong center class, but that doesn't always translate into the NHL. Sometimes that means that they're a better NHL winger, right? And we've seen that happen time and time again. And it's great to be versatile, and it's great to be able to have that movement and have a player that can do either. But yeah, I think
when you're expecting one thing and get another, it's kind of like, oh, okay, now we got to go back to like, plan A and figure out where we go from here.
Exactly. So, I mean, it'll be interesting. I'm excited to see what he does. I'm excited to see if maybe they get another first round pick somehow, some way. I mean, if you do package up a trade deal in the next couple of days or over the weekend, that's still a viable possibility.
Yeah.
But I trust them going in. They had said they kind of solidified their list already ahead of time, so they know what they want. They know what they can get. But we'll again talk more about that with Chris Peters. To round it out, we'll go even younger. High school hockey updates for those of you that missed it. The Minnesota High School League did approve winter sports to move forward. Everything's bumped back. Boys hockey starts November 23rd, girls hockey November 30th. So a little bit later, you can have a max of 2 contests, which means your Schwann's Cup is out. A lot of your favorite winter tournaments are out. Again, not a surprise, no spectators either. I don't know what that means for media, if we wanted to go cover a game or whatever. Alexis, have you heard? Because I know you cover some high school sports.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about hockey yet. I know and for those who don't know, because I don't know if I've ever really talked about it on the podcast, but I do cover high school sports for a cable access TV station. I've been doing that for like 6 years. So we just are finishing
get rid
up.
of us. I mean, we're everywhere.
We're everywhere. So we are just finishing up our soccer season now. We've got a couple more games next week, and then we've got volleyball and football starting beginning of October. And I know we're going to be covering those games. For football, we'll be out in the stands covering it. We're not going to be in the press boxes, which is going to get cold because the season is going to, linger into, the latter half of fall and into the beginning of winter there. For volleyball, I'm not sure what that's going to look like yet. And I haven't heard anything yet on hockey as far as what that's going to look like for us. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. I'm just happy that sports are returning for these high schoolers because I know how, how big of a part that is in their lives. And especially for those who aren't going to ever play at a higher level, that's it for them. And you want them to be able to experience that. So,
and now in volleyball and soccer and stuff, they don't have student sections either, right? Like there's no spectators there.
Soccer, yes. So soccer, I think it's a maximum of 250 fans. I think it kind of depends. I think it's dependent on like each school. So like for my the TV station I work for, we have like 6 teams that we cover. And for each game that we've covered, there's been fans at every game. I mean, it's been people are separated in the bleachers and whatnot. But yeah, they're supposed to wear masks, when they're there and all of that. But yeah, I think it's dependent on the school. But I think it's like a maximum of 250, no matter what school you are. But
which makes sense.
So we'll
I mean, soccer's outdoors, I guess, right? So there's that difference, and arenas can only hold so much, and it's hard to distance in an arena as we've all been to. That's part of
especially high school.
Everybody in,
they're smaller than like professional arenas and where you can see thousands of people. So yeah, we'll see. Did we want to, Jesse? I know you didn't put it in the rundown. Do we want to talk about our Conn Smythe winners? We put the tweet out, and we didn't.
You were the one that I was fine with.
Yeah, Jesse. Okay, let's talk about this because the race was close, and Jesse's trying to give me some heat for this, and I will not take it. So, Jesse, you are Victor Hedman. You think that was the right choice, like far and away, right?
I mean, I wouldn't say far and away. I guess I just wouldn't. I mean, I thought Braden Point was great. I mean, we want to talk about Braden Point getting passed up by the Wild, but at the same time,
my dad says that every single time he's on TV. He's like, Wild almost drafted him. I'm like,
Wild almost drafted him. Could have done that. No, but I guess it's because I didn't really have, like, I wasn't shocked that Hedman got it, right? Like, I was kind of just sure. I mean, really, you could argue for so many of those guys because there were so many standouts and so many stars, but also I just think that, like, yep, Hedman, that makes sense to me. I didn't have a strong feeling otherwise, but you thought differently, which I was like, I don't know.
I am all aboard the Braden Point for Conn Smythe train. I think that Braden Point should have been the Conn Smythe winner. Now, I just want to say, I don't have anything wrong with Hedman winning it because, again, I think you could have picked literally almost anybody on that Tampa Bay roster and you could have made an argument for why they should have gotten it. And I'm super happy for Victor Hedman, talented defenseman, obviously a huge, role player on that team, and they are much better with him on that team. I just think that the way Braden Point played in these playoffs, 14 playoff goals. He had 2 overtime goals, a series clinching overtime goal. I mean,
time too.
Yes,
right? Like that's certainly not playing every game.
And he's on the same line as Kucherov, which anyone who can stand out on a line with Kucherov, I think deserves, 2 thumbs up from me. So, and if you looked at the points, I think he was only like 4 points behind Hedman. I think Hedman got like 70 and Point got like 66. And then Kucherov was like a little bit lower than that. Vasilevsky only got 1 point in the voting. But yeah, I think I would have given it to Braden Point. I think that being said, have no problem with Hedman getting it, but that's who would have gotten my vote.
That'll do it for segment 1. We'll be back with more draft talk. Who are we looking at? Talk about some Minnesota guys, talk about some American guys. Who do you think the Wild are going to get? Chris Peters will have all that information. Stay tuned.
you want to continue to support the Beauts? Well, make sure you check out our official Bardown Beauties Teespring store. It's stocked full of mugs, fanny packs, baby Beauts merch, and everything else you can imagine. Every purchase goes to support the pod and the Beauts, and we make sure to toss sales out there from time to time. I know one just ended, but there's going to be plenty more in the future to support you and your wallet. So make sure you go check that out and get yourself some merch.
We're back. Joining us now, my personal mentor, a prospects and American hockey genius, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, despite being a Chicago Blackhawks fan, Chris Peters. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Jesse. It's great to be with you and Alexis here. This is I've been waiting for my invite to the Bardown Beauties podcast, and now that there's a draft, I guess sure, why not?
You know, absolutely. I'm glad that you have the Iowa State flag showing proudly in the back, by the way.
That's You're back on Jesse's good side, yeah.
That's how Chris and I got to know each other, actually. He handed the reins over to me of the Al Murdoch show back in the day at Iowa State, and then I continued to harass and follow him, went to USA Hockey after he was out there, and we just get to keep checking in once in a while. So it's great to have you on and make you an official Butte, Chris.
It's an honor. It's an absolute honor. And after all those years of, watching the Al Murdoch show and listening to your broadcasts and everything else, now I am returning the favor by gracing your podcast.
I love it. I love it. Well, and, Alexis and I have always been very honest. Prospects and younger players, we don't, unless they're American or Minnesotan, I really don't know anything about them, but you are the guru when it comes to this. So we had to get you on to talk NHL draft, which is obviously happening. Minnesota Wild picking number 9. Who do you like for the Wild at that spot? Who do you think is a realistic possibility for Minnesota to grab and to maybe help build the youth prospects team?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think this draft, the top 10 is particularly good. So it's a good year to be in that number 9 spot. And basically a lot of the decisions are going to get made for the Wild before they even get there. Because, whoever's left, you're going to basically have 2 especially good options. And then it comes down to preference. I mean, I think in it kind of depends on how the rest of the draft goes, but we're kind of looking to see what is Steve Yzerman going to do at number 4, always a wild card. What are the Senators going to do with their number 5 pick, which is their second pick in the draft? I mean, those are the 2 kind of wild card picks that are going to dictate the rest of that first round. And I think for the Wild in particular, there's going to be scoring wingers available probably in that range, and or potentially the goaltender Yaroslav Askarov. And that's kind of what you have to zero in on. I think it's probably going to be one of, Alexander Holtz or maybe Marco Rossi, who's a center, but, maybe a wing, kind of like a Braden Point type. Got
to bring that up, huh? How the Wild slipped on Braden Point. It's all we're being reminded of this week.
We already covered it in the first segment. You don't got to remind everyone again.
It kind of just comes down to the preference. And I think if the goaltender is there, even though the Wild have Kaapo Kähkönen and have Hunter Jones, and those are great prospects, for me, there's no better goalie prospect and hasn't been a better goalie prospect in years than Askarov. And really, I think if you're looking to build out a team, you need to have a number 1 goaltender. And obviously, the Wild have discovered that over the years. They kind of lucked out to Devan Dubnyk having a resurgence in his career as he was there. But they haven't had a lot of homegrown goaltenders, over the years. So you want to have a guy like that potentially. But I mean, if you look at Alexander Holtz and, potential scoring winger, one of the best goal scorers in this draft, I have no idea where he's going to end up falling, but I think that he's an excellent option. I don't think either of the top 2 defensemen will be there, but I don't think that's necessarily the direction the Wild are going to go anyway. So I'm really fascinated with what they're going to do with that number 9 pick based on what's available. But I think there's probably going to only be 2 to 3 legit options for them. And so that'll make the decision a little bit easier.
So I got to ask, you opened the door for a great conversation because in segment 1, I kind of went on a rant about how I swear to God, I hope the Wild do not pick a goalie in the first round. And now you're making a case for it. And you even mentioned some wingers. You didn't really say too much about the centers though, which Jesse and I think they should maybe try to get a center in the first round. If you're the Wild, just say, put aside obviously who the number 1 pick is going to be and kind of who you think might fall in those first few picks of the draft. Who do you think the Wild should go for? Do you really think a goalie might be a good first pick? Do you think you try to go for a winger? What would you do if you're the GM?
Well, I think if Askarov is there at 9, I think he's the best player available. So that's what I would do. If he's gone and Alexander Holtz is there or Marco Rossi is there, I probably would pick Rossi. So, and that's a center, a center, we're not really sure exactly.
Right.
I mean,
it's versatile.
Up to him. It's up to him to kind of, he's a shorter player, but obviously we've seen Braden Point have great success. Sorry to bring him up again, but we've had him see great successes, basically, statistically the shortest center in the league. So that's something that you can kind of look at. I don't think it's worth like reaching, say, for like an Anton Lundell, who's probably one of the other really good centers available. I think that there's just enough of a gap between him and the rest of those guys.
Sure.
So I would rather take, if Askarov is there and he's the best player available, that's the pick. If he's not, and it's Alexander Holtz or it's Marco Rossi, maybe both those guys are gone, and then it's easy and you take Holtz and you're good to go. But I mean, they're going to be in a good position. No matter what, just because I think the quality of this top 10 is just so high.
You had mentioned the top 10 being high, but do you think in general this class is pretty strong? Last year was an incredibly strong class, especially for the American side. Do you kind of see a similar strong class, or is it a little bit depleted compared to last season?
I think it's an average class. Like I think that we label these classes and often kind of mislabel them. Like I don't think this is a particularly deep draft. Mm-hmm. It's a top heavy draft, and so. Sure. The quality of the top 10 kind of influences how we think about the rest of the draft. But that's obviously, I mean, there's, 200 more picks after that. So, that's basically there. For me, the drop off starts, kind of in the 20s, and I get less and less excited about the prospects as we go along. And it's not that they're bad prospects. It's just that I can't comfortably project them as well as some of these guys that are in the top of the class. And so for that, I think that it's an okay class. So, it's really interesting to see how that top 10 has influenced how we view this class. But I think once you get outside of that top 10, it becomes a very average draft.
So what about the American class specifically? In comparison to last year, do you think this one is maybe a little bit more impressive? Is there more options here this year?
This is probably one of the weakest American draft classes in recent memory. I think as many as 2 will go in the first round, probably not more than that. Jake Sanderson is a legitimate top 10 prospect, defenseman out of the National Team Development Program. Certainly there are going to be, I think you're going to see quite a few Americans go in those mid to late rounds. Sure. We'll start seeing some of those Minnesota high schoolers go in those mid to late rounds, like Blake Biondi, Wyatt Kaiser. Very interested to see if Jake Ratzlaff gets drafted as a dual sport athlete or triple sport athlete. Mm-hmm. And a lot of teams are interested in him, but it's just, will he choose hockey? Because he's got Power 5 offers for football, which is incredible for him. But this American class in general, there's not a lot of star power. I think they do have the second best goalie in the draft in Drew Comesso, but that's a big gap between him and where Yaroslav Askarov is. And, he could be a second or third round prospect. So, I think that's kind of what we're seeing. It was a bit of I wouldn't necessarily say a lean year for the National Team Development Program, but it wasn't as star-laden. And unfortunately, they had to follow the best draft class that program has had in terms of first round draft prospects. So, so I mean, I think for the Americans, this is what we would consider a weak year.
That's fair. And I'm glad you mentioned Wyatt Kaiser and Jake Ratzlaff, because it is like, those are the 2, and Blake Biondi too. I mean, phenomenal. Minnesota usually does do a little bit higher. Do you think the NTDP at all has played a role in changing the decision that Minnesotans make? Do you see more Minnesotans going to the NTDP and developing in a different way, or do you think it's better for them to develop at high school? Is there a better route to the NHL in your opinion?
I mean, I think everybody has to take their own path. And I think as we've seen over the years, there is no right way. You can be the kid that goes directly from high school to college and make it just fine, like a Ryan McDonough. And, there are plenty of players like that have come out. I think scouts have become a little bit more careful when it comes to picking, particularly high school students, not just Minnesota high school, but prep school students as well. We've seen most of the high school kids that have gone in the first round in recent years have not done all that well, have not really panned out. And it's because you're projecting out against, they're dominating in the games that they should dominate. They're not playing as many games as the junior players at a high enough level. They're not being necessarily challenged enough. Well, but there are players that can overcome that. There are players that if they put the work in on their own, if they do the things that they need to do, you think of guys like McDonough, like Brock Nelson, that did the things that they needed to do to become NHL players. That's a lot that allows them to separate. But I think it's going to be, we might not see another high school player go in the first round for some time, just because I think there is a real reluctance because there's so much projecting that goes on. I mean, you look at a few years back, Riley Tufte, and just a behemoth of a human being, went to UMD. You know, he's got his national championships. There's nothing wrong with that, but I don't think he developed, you know, there's nothing that's going to justify that first round pick unless he has some miraculous kind of late spurt in his development. So, I mean, it's just, you have to be careful. The scouts are better than they've ever been at identifying talent, and they have, you know, they weigh that risk, but you have to be super comfortable with a player that is in the high school or prep school ranks to be able to use a first round draft pick, which is obviously one of the most highly valuable assets you have in your organization.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of projection, I mean, let's go back a year to the Wild's first round pick last year, Matt Boldy. What can you tell Wild fans about him? Was that a solid move by the Wild?
I mean, I'm a huge Matt Boldy fan, and I have been, you know, for the last 3 years, and going back to his U17 year, I was like, you know, I'm hearing all about this Jack Hughes. I'm hearing all about Trevor Zegras, and how come this Matt Boldy keeps making all these plays over there? So, you know, that's that, you know, and then this year was a bit of a struggle. I think the transition to college was not easy for him. And that happens to a lot of players, whether they come from the national team development program or straight from high school, wherever. There is an adjustment. And I think he found his game towards the end of the season. I saw him be much more like the Matt Boldy that we saw last year at the under-18 program. And then here's a guy that has tremendous skill, great size, great shot. You know, he does a lot of things really well. His foot speed is still kind of coming along. It needs to improve a little bit more for him to be a more effective prospect. But, you know, he was left off the World Junior team last year, and I thought it was a mistake not to even invite him to camp, because I think just he had that skill to play for that team. He just didn't have that great first half. I don't think there's any way they leave him home this time, because he's going to be such an important offensive asset to them. And obviously we have to wait and see what this season is going to do in terms of, is college hockey coming back? How many games are they going to play, you know, for a guy like him? So, you know, he's still very much on track. I don't worry about him very much. He's playing with Alex Newhook at Boston College, and those are two elite college hockey players together. I think that if we get a season, they could be among, you know, the top forwards in college hockey as sophomores this year. So, you know, I think Boldy he might have been a controversial pick a little bit at the time. I think that a lot of people were like, why isn't Cole Caulfield going?
Yeah.
You know, and all those different things. But I mean, Caulfield even, you know, he didn't necessarily score at the level that we thought he might. So that happened to a lot of those guys. They got away from that team dynamic where they were all superstars and had to be the go-to guy.
Yeah.
And so that kind of changes things a little bit. You know, where Matt Boldy goes from being kind of almost a secondary scoring player on that team. And we like, hey, we need you to be the guy.
Yeah.
As a freshman. That's a hard transition to make.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he was playing that. I remember watching Matt Boldy in the All-American Prospects game, and he looked great. I mean, he really did. But yeah, their cast that he was playing with was unreal too. I mean, he had the best, but I thought the same thing. I mean, he struggled very handily at the beginning of that season, and it was great to see him kind of find a groove toward the second half of last year. And I think Wild fans can calm themselves a little bit. Another Wild player that we'd like to ask you about would be Luke Cunnin. I think you're pretty familiar with him as a player. Do you see him developing and having more of a scoring role or a presence, or do you think kind of what we've seen out of Luke is what we're going to get? And also I want to talk about his leadership qualities. He showed that with USA team in Wisconsin. Do you think he has potential to wear a letter down the road for the Wild?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you just look at the way that he plays and just the heart that he plays with. I mean, you know, and he's a guy that he's not going to blow you away with skill. He has skill. He can score. He can make plays, you know, and his leadership is obviously well known. And the fact that he's worn letters on every national team that he played on, and that he was such an important piece at Wisconsin while he was there. I mean, he was kind of helped that transition when Tony Granato took over. Because he got a year with Luke Cunnin. And I mean, Tony still raves about what he did in that season. And so I think, you know, what you're going to get out of him is not necessarily going to be high level production, but you're going to get that secondary scoring, and you're going to get a guy that you can put in tough matchups, who's going to grind down the other team. Now, what did the Tampa Bay Lightning need to win the Stanley Cup? They needed more players like Luke Cunnin. They needed a Blake Coleman. They needed a Barclay Goodrow. I think that Luke Cunnin can be a cut above those guys. I think he can become a 20-goal scorer on a regular basis. And if he does that, that's a huge bonus on top of what he already brings in terms of the physicality, the tenacity, the work ethic, and then of course the potential one day to be, maybe even the captain of the Wild. You never know. I mean, it's just kind of, he's such a good player to kind of exemplify, as an example for everybody, that's kind of, that might not have the high level skill of, even a Matt Boldy, but he's got that drive and he is the kind of guy that you can win with. And so teams are always looking for players that play like Luke Cunnin, because as we've seen, if you don't have them, it's really hard to win in the playoffs.
And what about two other guys too that we're kind of have been waiting and seeing, Jordan Greenway and Ryan Donato? Do you see them kind of developing into more? I mean, I know Donato struggled a little bit in Boston too, and coming to Minnesota in exchange for Charlie Coyle hasn't really helped him. And Jordan Greenway, you see glimpses of Jordan doing really well, and then it kind of disappears. What do you think needs to happen to get those two going? And again, do you think that they have the level to sustain that caliber here at the NHL?
Yeah, it's tough to say. I mean, Jordan is for him, it's always kind of been the story, like where it's like you see these flashes of just elite power forward potential, and you say, here's a guy that is just going to bully everybody. And then you see instances where it's just not there. And I have the ability to see the Iowa Wild a lot. And so when I saw Donato and Greenway with the Wild in Iowa, it was like, oh, these guys are ready to be huge impact players in the NHL. And it hasn't really materialized. I think Ryan Donato has high-end scoring ability. He definitely has that in him. It's a matter of, I think he's a guy that needs to be surrounded with some help. He's not a guy that I think can drive play a ton on his own. But I think that, Jordan Greenway has to find that as well to drive play on his own, because he's such a physical force that, if he can discover, set that level of consistency, the same effort every night, the same, and he has enough skill to create and produce some offense. So, it's just both of those guys. I think, you're not going to get stars out of them. You're going to get pieces, depth players, and that's where you're kind of like, oh man, I believe me, when Ryan Donato got traded to the Wild, I was like, what's Boston doing? Why? I like Charlie Coyle. I like him a lot, but why would you give up on Ryan Donato that much? And as we saw, that was a trade that worked out way better for the Bruins than it did for the Wild so far. And, his name keeps coming up in these trade rumors and all these other things. And that's, completely legit. I mean, he's the type of player that maybe it didn't work out at the Wild, but it could work out somewhere else. And I mean, you run that risk and you worry about that all the time. Like if we trade this guy and he does way better over there, then we have to start asking questions about what we did wrong.
Alex Tuck.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I could have said that was a bad call from the beginning. I would have been like, no.
That was the one where I was like, they're going to regret that. And they did. And the crazy thing but I think Alex Tuck is also a good example, though, of a player that just continued his development at the professional level. And he wasn't this. Like his skating ability was not there, not at that level when he was a prospect for the Wild. But he had the scoring ability, he had the offensive potential, all those things. So you say that about Ryan Donato, he has the scoring potential, he has the ability. How do we get it out of him? And that's what the Wild are going to have to figure out, or they'll have to trade him.
So let's talk about the Iowa Wild for a second, because you brought them up a couple times, and that's where, more of those prospects are down there marinating. What do you see out of that team? Even like Cunnin, like talking about the goalie situation, is there potential that he could thrive at the NHL level in a season as soon as this upcoming year? And just some other guys that stand out on that team. What do you like down there?
Yeah, I mean, I every time I went and saw them, Nico Sturm really stood out. I think that he's not a guy that's going to play in your top six, but he's going to be a really solid middle six, bottom six forward and center, and a guy that can PK for you. His skating has really gotten to a level where I think it's going to be a problem for teams on the forecheck when he's going in on the forecheck. He's got good size. He's got that tenacity. Every time I watch them play, he stood out. Obviously, Cunnin. The thing that's interesting about him is just that you always know what you're going to get from him. It's just a very even keel of a goaltender. His body language is fantastic. His technical skill is fantastic. You never really worry about him. He sucks up rebounds. It's really impressive to see. So yes, I do think that he can be an impact goaltender for them next season. I don't necessarily know if he's ready to be a number one. I'm pretty sure he's not ready to be a number one at the NHL level, but it's something that you at least say, we have a player that we believe in that can help us. And I think just in a general sense, what I've seen from the Wild over the last few years, obviously they've been more competitive, which is really, really important for the NHL level. I think it's super important to make sure that you have an AHL team that can compete and win games at that level. Now, the primary goal is development. It's not to win games. But if you can do both, and I think that they have a coach in Tim Army that can do that can be a developer of talent and also try to win games. I mean, and they've had, Gerald Mayhew and, Sam Anis and all these guys, they have developed as, even if they're not going to help you at the NHL level, they're going to help your AHL team learn how to win and be better. And so, and those guys very well could. Like, I think Jerry Mayhew is like, if he's not an NHL player, he's a quadruple A player. Like it's like he's somewhere between, So, and unfortunately, we see this over and over. There are these tweeners that are guys that, they're so close to the NHL, but they haven't quite taken that next step. So, but the Iowa Wild has really impressed me. And I think, once they get some of the other guys, like Beckman and Hovanov and, guys like that, they'll be, they'll have an opportunity to really make some noise in the AHL.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was going to be my next question, because from what I see, and obviously I don't get to watch a lot of the Iowa Wild, right? I see, the results up with Wild. I don't know that a lot of those guys translate. I think they have a very good AHL team, and, the glimpses that we saw of Gerald Mayhew up here, I'm just like, he's not NHL caliber. I just don't think you're there. And I think you're right. He could be a very in-between. And I've seen that a lot. A lot of the guys that they try to bring up, it doesn't seem to work. Do you think that's something that the Iowa Wild or, the Iowa needs to address in better developing some of these guys? Or do you think it's part of the prospect pool hasn't been there? The Wild obviously haven't had many first rounders, so that doesn't really help. I mean, what needs to change a little bit in order to say, hey, we've got a great AHL team, a great pool that we can truly dip into and find more guys like Nico Sturm who could translate, or more guys that they can call up and just be a little bit better and actually help them more?
Yeah, I mean, it starts at the draft. I mean, most of the time you look at some of those undrafted free agents and the guys that, that are signed and with the hopes that maybe they can help the NHL team, like, Anis, and now I think Sturm is going to really be one that pans out in terms of a college free agent that they've gotten that I think will help at the NHL level. But I mean, there's only so much development that can happen with those players. And the Iowa Wild have not had the high-end prospects. Typically they haven't had a lot of the guys, but I think you see, Colton Saucerman, and see the things that or Susie. I'm saying like, Colton Saucerman, who's a completely different player. Susie. Oh my gosh.
I was just going to let you go. I was like, maybe he knows something we don't know.
Yeah. Saucerman is a real player, but not one who plays for the Wild.
No.
Susie
might really test free agency.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and that's but that's one of those things where you're like, hey, here's a guy that and he developed in the AHL. I think he's a guy that did develop into an NHL defenseman, and he always impressed me. And I was like, here's a guy that's going to play for the Wild, and then he did. So aside from completely botching his name, good player. And if he does test free agency, that's unfortunate. And I know there are a lot of teams that are interested. Because he has got that size. He's mean. He can play. I mean, I watched him really, commit murder at the AHL level a few times. And so, so I mean, that's that those are the types of players. Your AHL team isn't gonna, develop an entire team for you. They're gonna give you pieces. And unless they have, like, you look at who Tampa had in the AHL before their cup runs. Yeah. And it was Kucherov was in there, Point, Tyler Johnson, Andre Palat. They were all developed in the AHL, but those are elite players that are getting there. So it's just a matter of, it starts at the draft, and then you have to hope that those guys eventually translate. And then, the Wild have obviously had guys that have been able to skip that step as well. So it just kind of goes with it's all part of it.
What NHL team right now do you think has the strongest AHL squad that they're going to be able to pluck from? I hear Detroit's really built up their program, which they have to. They don't have much else.
Like, what else are they doing?
But yeah, I mean, who's kind of the biggest one out there? Who's the biggest AHL team that's going to really thrive for their NHL squad?
Yeah, I mean, I think Grand Rapids is certainly one of them. Philip Zadina played there last year. Philip Hronik, those are guys that made the NHL roster. They've got Joe Valeno down there. Moritz Seider, who I think will probably be on the NHL roster next season. So that was a team where there was a lot of prospects. Next year, the team that I'm most excited to see is the Ontario Reign, which is the Los Angeles Kings AHL franchise. Now, the Kings and the Rangers probably have the two best prospect pools.
I was going to say the
NHL.
Rangers, yeah.
Yeah. And so the Hartford Wolfpack, very fun last year, but that's because they had Shesterkin, they had other guys, they had more. And they're going to lose some of those guys, but they'll get like Keandre Miller and other players next season that will help them. But the Ontario Reign is going to have, Alex Turcotte, Rasmus Kupari, Jared Anderson Dolan, guys that have, higher end prospects, Akil Thomas. They're guys that we've either seen at the World Juniors or seen become stars at the college and junior level. And that's one of those teams where it's just like, wow, that's a star-studded team. And still, we don't know what the AHL season is going to look like. They're obviously trying really hard to make sure they have a season. But, boy, I mean, it just goes to show you how important that level is, because you really can, build a championship caliber roster. I mean, I don't think that the Tampa Bay Lightning are a perennial contender without having that run that they had in the AHL, where so many of those guys learned how to win.
Yeah.
And so, and then obviously John Cooper has won everywhere. So, so it was only a matter of time, that they were going to win. But so that's it.
Well, I think my last question, and Jesse and I have kind of touched on this throughout episodes here during the pause and even after the play had been resumed in the NHL, but how important is it, and how much does it affect, the possibility of shortened season, postponed seasons, canceled seasons for these developing levels? It really, even all the way down, we've talked about having high school seasons delayed for these players who are going to go on and play professionally someday. From your perspective, how much does that really affect drafts in the future?
Yeah, I mean, this draft was weird. The 2020 draft is weird because we had the cutoff. 2021 is going to be way worse. So, I mean, I'm just telling you right now, because one of the things that I think is really concerning is that we don't know how many times teams are going to have to shut down. We don't know how many times teams are going to have to quarantine. It happened in Finland. It's happened in Russia. I mean, Russia's top team right now had to dress like 10 players from their U20 team on the KHL roster because of COVID. So, so we're really concerned. And it is a huge concern. Losing any amount of the AHL season would be devastating. We would probably lose teams, the teams that aren't subsidized by the NHL roster. Or NHL ownership, very concerned about that. College hockey, clearly, obviously, they're going to, Harvard lost almost its entire team to either junior or pro or Europe. I mean, so that it's devastating in that regard. But so you want players playing. That's why so many teams have tried to loan players to Europe. And most of the teams in Sweden are saying, we'll only take a full season loan. If you're going to give us a guy, he has to be here all year. And there are more teams now that are willing to do that because they have no idea when their AHL team is going to start playing.
Yeah.
The junior season, the QMJHL actually starts this weekend. And, you hope that goes off without a hitch. But from what I understand, scouts cannot go into games at the Maritimes and in Quebec City and Montreal. So you can't go into games to even watch them anyway. So, but really the most important thing about games happening is the development aspect, because if you need reps, and practice is important, playing scrimmages and all that other stuff, you can help develop. But if you're not in a game situation, you lose some of that feel, you lose some of that timing, you lose some of that, that ability to just compete. And so I think I'm very hopeful that this is going to get better in terms of at least enough to allow teams to play.
Yeah.
But I know it's going to make my job harder. It's going to make the scouts' jobs harder.
Yeah.
They can't even get into college practices right now to just watch teams practice and scrimmage. And so that's a huge problem for teams. And they're going to have to invest more and more in video scouting. They're going to have to invest more and more in just doing analytics and everything else. So I am semi-terrified about the 2021 draft class. Yeah.
That makes sense. I love that. Two very important questions then that I also have for you. Who was your vote for Calder? And did you get sick of seeing your commercial run? I can't remember if that was during the NCAA Frozen Four or the World Juniors. And can we expect to see more Chris Peters commercials run during either of those events this year?
Yeah. So I recorded an intermission segment for the NCAA tournament last season, and I was told that it would run multiple times. I didn't know that it was going to run every intermission. But everybody got to learn my takes on Cale Makar, and I think, I forget who else I even talked about at that point, but I mean, I think I'll probably do more with ESPN if there's college hockey. I don't think it'll be the same one over and over again.
Yeah.
But I mean, I certainly hope to be involved in that. And then my Calder pick was actually Quinn Hughes.
You were with Jesse. Yeah, I had Makar. Jesse had Hughes.
Yeah, and after I did that, like, I always pour over my ballot like super, super carefully and take my time. And and it helped that I did rookie rankings all throughout the season. And there's no doubt in my mind that those two guys are at an equal level in terms of impact. But the reason that I put Quinn Hughes over the top was because I felt that as good as Makar was and as important as he was to the Avalanche, Quinn Hughes was vital to the Vancouver Canucks. Without him, I don't think they have the season that they had. And that's probably true of the Avalanche as well, but not to the same degree.
Not
because
the extent,
they have such tremendous forwards. And but Quinn Hughes to me, and really, I had no problem with Cale taking it because and I was more than happy to watch him last season win the Hobey Baker, and certainly it's good news for college hockey that 2 of the 3 finalists were college hockey players just the year prior. But to me, I think Cale Makar might end up being long-term the better defenseman, but I think just in terms of rookie impact, to me, Hughes just made that much more of an impact than Makar. So it was a tough decision. It was like picking between my kids. But,
but you do have a favorite. See, I admit it. Parents always have a favorite. No?
Yeah, maybe. No comment on that one. So, but it's honestly, that was like one of the most fun rookie seasons
it was.
I can remember. It was great to watch.
Yeah, we were on the same page. Like either way, I get it, right? They were both tremendous players, but I just kind of, I leaned more toward Hughes just for exactly what you had said. I mean, in Vancouver, he was kind of the guy. I mean, he was a game changer, very guy to pivot around, and especially in the playoffs. You saw him. Without him in the playoffs, Vancouver didn't do what they did and didn't accomplish what they had. And Cale does. He has surrounding amazing talent, so it's hard not to thrive. And good on him, though, for shining amongst that talent, right? I mean, he's still noticeable even with McKinnon's and
absolutely.
That, so.
Absolutely.
I even started to switch over halfway through the playoffs. I was like, you know what? I actually maybe think Hughes might be the Calder winner. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, perfect. Well, Chris, thank you again so much for enlightening us on all the prospect stuff. We really appreciate it. Where can people find you and listen to you?
Yeah, well, you can find me on Twitter, Chris M. Peters, and then also ESPN.com, ESPN Plus. We'll have a mock draft out. We'll have all kinds of drafts and analysis, live stuff, winners, losers, grades, all that good stuff. That is, done way too soon after the draft, and we'll have to wait 5 years down the road to really know who won and who lost. But it is a great opportunity to kind of a fun exercise, and we hope people enjoy it. And obviously, it's been a real thrill for me to be able to do this job and to do it. I'd love to get back in a rink, like that'd be amazing if we could do that. But I mean, certainly this has been a fun draft class to cover. I can't wait to move on from it. But I mean, I think that this is going to be a really fun, weird, just crazy draft, and I can't wait for it.
And Wild fans, it'll be fine. We'll get somebody that's of talent, hopefully.
It's going to be a good player.
Yes, there you go.
Unless it's like not, but it'll be a good player.
Yeah.
That's how it usually goes.
Yeah. Well, again, Chris, thank you so much. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Don't miss a beat with the Beauties. Make sure you're subscribing to Bardown Beauties podcast on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Once subscribed, help us grow by rating and telling us what you think about Bardown Beauties. We love bringing you fresh eps each and every week and need your help to reach new listeners and new heights. Appreciate your love and support. You're a beauty.
We're back. Thanks again to Mr. Peters. He was my mentor. I remember interviewing him. I was like a freshman in college, and I'm like, I want to do hockey stuff and whatever. And he's like, where are you from? I'm like, Minnesota. He's like, hired. And I'm like, yes,
perfect.
Let's do that. So we did we both had like a cable access show called the Al Murdoch Show every week, where we would sit and talk college hockey. For those that don't know, Cyclone Hockey is an ACHA club team. So some pretty fun stuff. Yeah, and Chris is the best. He knows way more than Alexis and I ever could. So
you guys would have gotten like 30 seconds of prospect content out of Jesse and I combined if we would have had to talk about that on our own, because I appreciate him coming on, because I know that, this time of year, obviously that's a hot topic, and it's nice to have someone who knows so much about the prospects be able to share some insight. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the interview, and hopefully we can have him back on after the draft at some point and kind of recap what the Wild did.
Like, there's nobody else I would rather have on talk than Mr. Peters. So again, thank you to him for joining us. We'll see what unfolds in tomorrow's draft, or over Wednesday too, I guess, and technically. So, but before we let you guys go, we have everyone's favorite segment where Alexis dives into her youth hockey journals to wreak havoc on the Wild or whoever their opponent may have been for that night. Here's Dear Diary with Alexis.
Wild versus Blue Jackets, October 3rd, 2009. In the first period, Clutterbuck lost his stick, and instead of doing nothing, he checks at Columbus dude. Good old Cal, and nothing better. Whether we lost or not, when you see effort like this, you must give a round of applause. And now I pause to clap. Okay, first of all, I just got to say, John Tortorella, I'm so sorry that I was dissing your old team like that. Second of all,
he was in New York at that time, I think, right?
So no, he definitely wasn't with the Blue Jackets then. But yeah, no. Cal Clutterbuck was like one of my favorite players. I was like big on the Bruisers when I was younger, and so yeah.
You still kind of are. I mean, Foligno can still be considered a Bruiser.
True. I do love Foligno, yeah.
Yeah. So I got nothing else to say. I used to love Cal too. Just the name Clutterbuck. Like, it's just an epic last name. Like, that's a name that's destined to be a solid hockey player.
And his mustache, I'm sorry. Like, how can you not love that? I mean, didn't he always have like crazy socks and stuff too? Like, wasn't there a whole thing with that? I don't know. The mustache sold me. I loved his physicality, his play. And obviously he's with the Islanders now, and I put out a tweet during the playoffs. I was like, is it just me, or does Cal Clutterbuck look like he has not aged at all? Like, I swear he looks like how he looked 10 years ago.
I remember seeing him, and hilarious. It was like him, Mikko Koivu. God, who else was it? A couple other guys out at Sally's back in the day. Like, and yes, I was at Sally's, and I had to laugh because it was like ladies drink free night. I'm like, what are these guys doing at a ladies drink free night? They can afford to buy a girl a drink, and yada yada. Like, it was classic. And it was funny because nobody recognized them. I was like the only one of my group of friends that knew who they were, because I'm the only one that gave a shit about hockey. And I was like, Cal Clutterbuck and Mikko Koivu, and I'm a young, like 22-year-old or whatever, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, that's so cool. But he was the best. I love it.
Cal Clutterbuck, love him.
Yes. Well, that does it for this week's episode. Again, thank you to everybody for checking it out. We will actually have some draft coverage, so be sure to stay tuned to all of our social channels. Make sure you're subscribing to this podcast. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube. Give us a rating, give us a love, give us a like, share it with your friends, so we can keep this thing growing. We've got a lot of exciting things we're actually going to announce for season 2. Drum roll, we will have an official season 2 kickoff, as well as some new exciting partnerships to talk about. And as we're just going to keep this bad boy growing. Let's go, Beauts. Let's go. That'll do it. Have a great day, guys. Bye.